welcome to Question Time. Good evening, welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, we have Rory Stewart, the government's prison minister, a former Foreign Office minister. He was also deputy governor of 2 Iraqi provinces after the war. Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, an MP for more than 30 years, and a member of Jeremy Corbyn's close circle, Diane Abbott. Kirsty Blackman, the SNP's spokesperson on the economy and deputy leader of the party of Westminster. Anand Menon, Professor of European Politics at King's College London and the Director of a think tank which specialises in the UK's relations with the EU. And last but not least, political journalist, author and ardent Brexiteer, I think it's fair to say, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome to all of you here, welcome to my panel, of course welcome to you at home as well. Now, the argument will take place here, but you can argue along at home as you know. You can use the hashtag BBCQT on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Join in. Right, let's hear our first question from Jane Butler.
Is there any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority?
Well, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it, folks? After Theresa May has, I think it's fair to say, dismally failed to do so thus far. Rory Stewart.
So you've put your finger on the big issue here. What we know, I think, is that there are perhaps 80, maybe as many as 150 MPs that want Remain through a second referendum. We know there are maybe 80 MPs who want no deal at all, which leaves about 400 MPs who presumably want a kind of deal. 200 of them have said that they want the Prime Minister's deal, which is that 500-page document. That leaves another 200 MPs who haven't said exactly what kind of deal they want. And the whole question over the next few weeks is, can we get people to be specific? Presumably they're not going to like all the 500 pages, but presumably they're going to like 495 of them. And we've got to pin it down to what sentences, which bits they do and don't like in order to build the majority.
You said in a few weeks the Prime Minister's got to come back on Monday.
So
with some kind of plan.
No, the Prime Minister will come back on Monday with a statement. I'm afraid, being realistic, it doesn't feel to me as though we'll have a majority by Monday. I think this.
And what about by the 29th of January, which is when the vote will take place, as we found out today?
Well, I pray, because there's been a lot of talk about how the government has had a long time to get this together. But to be fair to the government, and obviously I'm a government minister, so I'm a bit biased here, but to be fair to the government, there is a 500-page document. At least you can read what the government wants. The question is, what do other people really want and not want? And the frustrating thing at the moment, if you look at the amendments going through the House of Commons, is when you say to MPs, okay, will you tell us what would make you vote for this document? Exactly what would you change in this document? It's almost impossible to get them to sign a piece of paper. And if they don't, how do you go back to Brussels and say, please, it's going to be very difficult, I'm not sure you can do it, but you might be able to say, please change this, because if you change this, we'll have a majority in the House of Commons. And that's where we haven't really got yet.
Kirsty Blackman, any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority?
I still think, and I said from the beginning, that actually you were potentially looking at a parliamentary majority for customs union and single market membership. But I think what the Prime Minister needs to do now...
There's no evidence of that. I mean, that's wishful thinking, surely.
And that's where I thought we were, and it's never been tested, because that's not what the Prime Minister's deal says. But I think looking across the benches, looking at the Labour Party, who have now come out in favour of customs union, looking at the Conservative backbenchers who support that very close relationship with the EU, I think you're potentially looking at that. But what the Prime Minister needs to do now, given that very short timescale that you were just mentioning, is extend Article 50. That removes the threat of no deal, and that means that we can have options going forward.
Diane, I'm going to come to you. Let's hear from the woman in the back there.
I'd like to know if Rory thinks that Theresa May is likely to disband any of her red lines.
Well, I think the big question going forward is what is consistent with the Brexit vote. So those red lines that the Prime Minister's produced are the Prime Minister's judgment on what she felt people were voting for in the referendum. Now, there'll be many people in the room who will disagree, but her honest view, and I think it's a reasonable view, is that she felt that people voting for Brexit would expect to have control over immigration, control over free movement of people, and expected to be able to strike trade deals. Those were the two fundamental red lines.
But the thing is, we are where we are now, where the deal with those red lines has not got through Parliament. Theresa May is well, she's also not talking to Jeremy Corbyn, we'll get onto that in a minute, but she has talked to other political leaders. Clearly there, she's talking about finding common ground. You've got the Justice Secretary, David Cork, who said, we need to find a majority in the House of Commons that's consistent with leaving the customs union, but we need to be prepared to be flexible. Is Theresa May being flexible?
No.
No.
Well, I guess, to try to represent the problem here, the problem is the Prime Minister has spent 2 years negotiating this, and there are two
yes,
things...
but look where we are. You've had the vote, it's gone down in flames.
But there are two things we need. So the reason we need to be flexible is we need a majority in the House of Commons. But the reason we need to be realistic is that we also need 27 member states to agree. So actually there are two different things going on here. And the problem is that the flexibility has to be reasonable. It's got to be something that you can then agree with 27 member states in quite a short period of time, and that will involve some compromise.
I mean, can I just point out to you that Michel Barnier, of course, is the man we're negotiating with in the EU, says if the UK decides to adjust its own red lines, the EU will remain ready to go along with the evolution and respond favourably. Is there any sign that Theresa May is going to adjust her red lines?
Yes, I think there's definitely...
Is there?
Yeah, no, well, there's this. It's very clear that we lost the vote. I mean, there's no doubt about that, right? There were only...
But she realised it.
Yeah, there were, and not only am I saying this, the Prime Minister stood up immediately after that vote, and I was right next to her and said she acknowledges that that vote only got 200 votes. So, by definition, in order to get a majority in the House of Commons, it is going to have to change. But the question to members of Parliament is, what kind of changes do they want? Not big bad,
Okay. Well,
this is a rubbish deal, but exactly what are those changes?
So, what deal can achieve a parliamentary majority? Is there one, Diane?
I think that the parameters of a deal that the Labour Party would want to work with the government on would be a customs union, it would be a close relationship with the single market, and it would guarantee certain rights and freedoms, environmental standards, human rights, labour relations issues. And I have to say, people are saying that Jeremy Corbyn won't talk to Theresa May. In September, at Labour Party conference, in terms, the leader of the Labour Party said that if the Prime Minister offered a deal on these lines, a customs union, close relationship with the single market, and some guarantee of rights at work, he was prepared to work with her on it. And we heard nothing.
Well, of course, Diane, because that is not what people voted for.
Just let me finish. We heard nothing, the phone didn't ring. And after 2 years, for Theresa May to be phoning random Labour MPs last week was quite extraordinary. The problem has been all along that she didn't reach out to the House of Commons as a whole.
Yeah, but hang on, Diane. You've got a situation now where Jeremy Corbyn won't talk to Theresa May without a precondition, we'll get onto that, without no deal coming off the table. So he's writing to her, she's writing to him. Why don't we just talk?
We would have... We would have loved to talk. That's why Jeremy had it in his conference speech in September, and it's important to remind people of that.
But why not now? Why not now? Because
It's
now is now. There's no point in harking back to what was months ago.
It's better if you just let
And
me
also,
finish.
We'll be here all day if I let you
Jeremy
finish.
sometimes says you have to talk to people with whom you profoundly disagree. He's talking about Hezbollah and Hamas. Theresa May.
Just to get back to Brexit, the reason that we are saying that we wanted to take no deal off the table, we thought that was one of the easiest things you could concede on.
Because it's the law, Diane. No deal is the law. That is what will happen.
So why was Philip Hammond calling business people a few days ago, promising them that Parliament could block no deal? We asked her to do that because we thought it was the easiest thing for her to concede. Even members of the cabinet are against no deal. We know manufacturers in parts of the country like this are against no deal. It would be catastrophic. And actually, in terms of the safety of the realm, if we come up with no deal and no transition period, all sorts of security and policing arrangements will fall. We thought it was the easiest thing to concede. She hasn't conceded it. And if I was
it's not the easiest thing for her to concede that.
Cabinet don't want it.
But you know it's not the easiest thing for her to concede.
Cabinet don't want it. And if
Hang
I
on.
was a manufacturer or worker in this region, I would be very frightened indeed that Theresa May still sees no deal as a viable option.
Well, Diane,
Wait a minute,
it is simply impossible. Hang on, you've given me one word before you interrupt me. It is simply impossible. The Prime Minister cannot rule out no deal because no deal is what the legal default is. So she would have to introduce some new legislation. So why, May I just finish my point? But it's not just that she can't rule out no deal, it is that she shouldn't rule out no deal. Have you ever bought a car or a house, and did you go in there saying, whatever price that car or house is, I am not walking away unless I get that car or that house? You would never do that. So why on earth would you enter any negotiation with the future of our country by ruling out no deal?
Well,
It is an absurd
let's just
position.
clarify one thing, because today Theresa May has written to, because we know they're not talking, has written to Jeremy Corbyn saying that she cannot rule out no deal. It's not up to her. And is that true?
Well, I mean, there's an irony here, isn't there? Because Parliament has voted for a Brexit outcome. It has effectively voted for no deal because MPs voted to give the Prime Minister the authority to trigger Article 50 before they knew. The irony is that, of course, no deal is now the least popular outcome amongst parliamentarians, but it's the one that their voters enabled by not demanding of the Prime Minister before this started, before we give you the authority to trigger Article 50, let us know what you plan to negotiate. We'll have a consensus before we start.
But can you also, can she take no deal off the table?
No deal can't be taken off the table by an extension without the EU agreeing to it, by Parliament without Parliament coming up with a majority
But
for
she could
something
ask
else.
the Parliament.
She could ask
ask
Parliament
Parliament to
to
take
think
it off the table.
about
Let's just be really clear about this, because this is Theresa May's position tonight, and I
Yes.
want to be clear. If she decides to extend Article 50, she needs to get the rest of the EU to agree to it.
Yeah.
And if she wants to take withdrawal off the table, she needs to get Parliament to agree to it.
Yeah.
Or to get no deal off the table, to get Parliament to agree to it.
to get no deal off the
So
table.
it is possible, but she needs to do it in conjunction with others.
Parliament needs to agree on something else.
But the way to get no deal off the table is logically to have a deal. And the way to have a deal is for Jeremy Corbyn to sit down and talk to us and be precise.
Let's hear it. That's so many hands up. Let's start with the man there in the pale shirt and the grey top. Yes, you.
So I don't get how our parliament is so divided when we only represent 56 million or so people, when 27 countries and 450 million people have managed to unite and have their priorities on the table. Why can't we just finally unite as a country and move on? It's been 2 years.
The woman in that red and black top.
Rory said that Theresa May has been negotiating for 2 years. Well, I didn't see that happening at the beginning. I think she has left it and she has left it, and now she's saying there's 71 days, and okay, she's now trying to railroad Parliament, Brussels, everyone. Why didn't we have grown-ups doing it earlier on?
My name, the glasses.
By leaving no deal on the table, what it ultimately does, it's sort of scaring the EU to come back to the table. By taking that off the table, like Diane's just said there, we may as well just hand them everything.
Of course.
Right now, there is no way. No way.
Amanda Roger.
Like you said, most of Parliament is now do not favour no deal. Isn't that the problem, that all the voters favour no deal and the parliamentarians don't?
Absolutely.
Let's come back to the original question.
Yeah.
Is there any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority? Is there?
Well, the answer, look, I can save everybody a lot of time here. I've
Oh,
spent
dude, it's been 2 years, so
the short
please
answer,
do.
the short answer is no, there isn't, and that is why it seems to me the only option for Theresa May now, and I'm going to admit that it is a suboptimal position, is to walk away. That is all she can do.
So to leave with no deal?
Yes, absolutely, because there isn't an alternative.
Someone who supports that, because that was a massive cheer there. Yeah, you stuck your hand up so quickly, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite obvious that the European Union are playing a really good game of poker here. We've played our hand out in public. They've done all their negotiations behind closed doors. They've been shoulder to shoulder, and we haven't. I think if we're prepared to walk away now, Angela Merkel needs to sell 850,000 cars to this country. And she's got 2 million jobs at stake. That phone will be ringing pretty quickly if we walk away.
Anna, a deal that can command a majority. Can you see anything there?
Not now, no, but I think next week you'll see parliamentarians voting on lots of different options, and as those options prove to be unpopular, they'll fall off the table, and I think then the thing will shift. But can I just come back to no deal? I think it's very, very important to be clear about no deal. No deal isn't like buying something. It isn't like going to the shop, and if you don't find anything you like, you walk home again. You don't end up back where you started. No deal with the European Union means all the laws that govern our interaction with the European Union, whether you can fly, whether you can trade, whether you can shop, whether you can travel, cease to exist, right? Now, I don't know what people voted for when they voted Leave. 17 million people voted Leave. They voted for lots of different reasons, and they were told by the Leave campaign that a deal would be easy, so I don't believe all of them voted for no deal. But if you think no deal is fine, that's great, but be aware of what it means. It means severe disruption. And from the EU's point of view, what they are... You're absolutely right. No deal will hurt the Europeans. It will hurt Calais. It will hurt people in Belgium, in Amsterdam. It won't hurt all member states, and one of the reasons the EU has remained united is some member states don't really trade with us, so actually they've got better things to worry about than us, so they haven't really taken part in this. But no deal will hit us far worse than it will hit them. Look at this city, okay, where you have companies like Rolls-Royce, where you have companies like Toyota. The managing director of Toyota in Darwin has said, in the event of no deal, I can see us closing down at least temporarily because of the trouble we're going to have getting bits in. They export 90% of the Toyotas they make to continental Europe. It will be more difficult. So, in terms of keeping things going when it comes to trade, when it comes to travel, bear in mind travel will be affected too. At the moment, if we leave with no deal, you'll have to apply for a green pass to be able to drive in continental Europe, because those rules will have gone as well.
Northern Ireland into the south, for work, for health, they will need a green card, and they need to apply early.
I don't think that's true in Ireland, because you've got something called the common travel area in Ireland, which means that people
But
can
the
move.
common travel area doesn't cover insurance.
No, but it will affect all sorts of things eventually, like trade, particularly agricultural trade, which is massive in Ireland. So, if you want no deal, that's fine. But be honest about it. It implies a trade-off and it implies massive disruption.
There are so many areas of the Brexit issue that we want to cover this evening. I just want to have another go at the red lines in terms of Theresa May's red lines and what kind of deal we can expect from here, because that ultimately is what it's all about. Are we going to get a deal or aren't we? And if we are, what kind of deal will it be? So let's go to Bill Powell round, please.
Which red line should be scrapped so the UK is not left red-faced?
So which red line should go just a little bit pink? Or maybe vanish entirely? Now, listening to Theresa May in Parliament after she lost the vote, she talked about the things that she still feels are important, the things we were talking about earlier also, control of laws, borders. Is Theresa May prepared to compromise? And if so, which red lines need to go? Which ones would you draw?
Yeah. I think the answer is that you have to do, I'm afraid, 4 things. And the first thing is that you have to make sure that whatever you're delivering is still recognisably a Brexit deal. You can't water this thing down so much that the majority of people who felt they voted for Brexit are getting something that doesn't resemble what they voted for at all. So that's the first thing, in all honour, you have to do. If you're respecting a Brexit referendum, you have to try to be serious about what you felt that meant. I believe, but maybe I'm just speaking for my own constituents or people I talk to there, but I believe that involves controlling free movement of people. I don't think people who voted for Brexit wanted to continue allow free movement of people, right? So that, I think, would be probably the most important red line here. The other stuff, you could compromise on, but the final
like
point...
What? Give us for example. Because that's what it comes down to. Not generalities.
Yeah.
Which red lines could go? Where would you compromise?
Let's take a specific example. The backstop, right? If there was a majority in Parliament that you could demonstrate, if you could get Jeremy Corbyn to sign up and say that if you got rid of the backstop, he'd vote for the deal. If you got the Brexiteers to say if you got rid of... Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, he often says when he's on television, if you got rid of the backstop, I'd vote for the deal. What I'd like to see is for them to say it in writing so that we could then go back to Brussels and say, make this one change, you've got a majority in the House of Commons, the deal goes through.
But hang on, that's not Theresa May's red line, that's the EU's red line. Which red line that the Conservatives hold dear would you be prepared to compromise on?
For me, the one that I would not be prepared to compromise on is free movement.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
What would you, just quickly, because I'm not going to hear from everybody else, or is there nothing that you would be prepared to compromise
by implication, we have to get a majority. I would be prepared, I'm not the Prime Minister, I would be prepared to compromise on a great deal else. But the question is, are the other side serious? Are the other 200 MPs serious about wanting a deal at all, or are they just going to keep saying no to any compromise?
Well, let's find
if they're
out.
Serious, then of course we can shift red lines.
Well, we can ask. Diane Abbott. This is the moment of compromise. Which red lines would you compromise on?
Well, we have said, and we've been saying it since last year, the things that we think are important are the customs union, some sort of...
No, but we know what you think is important. You said that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So what would you compromise on? Which red lines have you got that in a negotiation you'd be prepared to compromise on?
Any red lines. It's only the government that's put forward red lines. That's my point.
But hang on, no red lines is no policy. You have got a policy.
We have got a policy and I've explained it to you.
Exactly. So are there any areas there that you'd be prepared to compromise on? A customs union, for example?
We're happy to talk to the government about some sort of movement on the customs union. The only thing that we have said, and it's not popular with this audience, but I assure you it's popular with business, is that you have to rule out no deal.
What about the 6 tests that Labour have set? One of the most interesting ones, perhaps, is that whatever deal is done has to deliver the same benefits as being in the single market and the customs union.
That was in fact David who said that, and we were just repeating what he'd said.
So is that not one of your 6 tests?
It is one of our 6
Oh,
tests.
right, okay.
But what we were doing was repeating what, let me see, was that the
Well,
second
hang on,
or
never
the
mind.
third
It's either your
Brexit
test or it isn't your test. If it is your test, I mean, Michel Barnier has said that's not possible. Third countries cannot have the same rights and benefits. Would that be something you'd compromise on?
Unlike the Prime Minister, we are prepared to be flexible on everything.
Okay.
Hang on a minute. You heard it here first. Literally everything. So no red lines at all.
No. What we want, with the Labour Party, What we want is a deal that is in the best interest of the entire country. We're not being rigid. We're not being rigid like the Prime Minister. The only thing we're saying is she has to take no deal off the table.
Okay, so sorry, can I just
very quickly,
very quickly. So in order to get any kind of future relationship, doesn't matter whether you're talking Norway or Canada, you have to go through the withdrawal agreement, 500-page text. The question is, what lines in that text do Labour want to change? That's what we're waiting for, not the big picture, not the we like a customs union, we like a single market relationship. Which pages, which lines, which sentences? If we can get an answer on that, we have a deal. If we have a deal, Britain will be in a much better place in 3 weeks' time.
Kirsty Black.
Well, our position is that we'd like to remain in the EU because people of Scotland voted to remain in the EU. We would like the whole UK to remain in the EU. So by definition, anything beyond that is a compromise.
Which red lines do you think should be scrapped?